Hello everybody, welcome to number 27, I'm Jack and this is a TVR Cerbera. When it was launched, this was the cheapest supercar in the world. In 1997, this cost only £40,000. There were only 3 hypercars that were quicker than the Cerbera. That was the Ferrari F50, the McLaren F1 and the Porsche GT1. And they cost many times more. So to give you an example, the F50 was £350,000. So 7-8 times more than the TVR. This was also less than half the price of a Porsche Turbo. And yet, in a drag race in the 1990s, hosted by Jeremy Clarkson, this comfortably beat it and every other car in the field. There is, though, a little bit more to that story. Let's take it out now. I can tell you how it drives, a bit more of its development history, and of course, also what went on with that drag race. So this represented a series of firsts for TVR. It was the very first 2+2 that they made. It was the first coupe. But even more importantly, this was the first TVR to have its own engine. And that's even more significant if you realise the size of the company. It was a very small outfit. And yet, when they were worried that their supplies of the Rover V8 would start to dry up, they decided not to maybe just get, I don't know, a Ford or a Chevy V8 from the States, but to make their own engines. Not just that, but they didn't even just make one engine, they made 2. This is the AJP8. They also had the 6. And that's not just, you know, a similar engine, 2 cylinders less. The 6 was a straight 6. This is a V8, designed by the legendary Al Melling. It has a dry sump, quite a long stroke, this 8, supposedly to give more low-down torque. It also has a flat plane crank, so like the Ferrari V8s, which gives it a very distinctive character. A lot of the design is taken from race engines, but bizarrely, to me at least, it is a single overhead cam, which doesn't quite fit in with the dry sump design and all the rest of it. There were 2 versions. There was the 4.2 and the 4.5. The 4.2 put out 360 as standard. The 4.5, I think, was supposed to put out 420, but that was regarded as rather optimistic. The other interesting thing about the engine in this car, in the Cerbera, is just how far back in the chassis it is. I think it's more accurate to say that this is a front mid-engined car than a front-engined car. I don't know why they made it so long. It looks like there's a load of room that just isn't really used for any practical purpose at all. Not the best day for it, admittedly. Lots of wheel spin there. Being a TVR, this does have a lot of idiosyncrasies. This is the first run, so it has the more standard looking front lights and not the Tuscan inspired lights, but all the same, it's a very interesting design. The car is incredibly low. It's of course glass fiber bodied with a steel spine chassis. The chassis do tend to rust a little bit on the outriggers, but other than that, they're actually fairly good cars. Now, the engines, there was a big problem with the straight 6s in terms of reliability. Those were forever sort of letting go. The 8s were much, much more reliable. Having said that, Kai, who has bought this car, did boil it over on the way home. He believes that there already was a bit of a problem. When they opened it up, they found that the head gasket had gone and it was literally just disintegrating. So it is possible that maybe they used the wrong coolant or whatever. Ever since then, it's been absolutely bang on perfect. He also had a bit of a special surprise when that happened. They told him, well, the bad news is that the head gasket is gone, so you need to do a rebuild. The good news is he bought this as a 4.2. It was sold as a 4.2. it's actually a 4.5. The block is 4.5 litres. It seems they probably didn't have any 4.2 litre blocks in at the time, so they just upgraded the car for free. As a result, this one, I think he's had it dynoed as well, is definitely pushing at least 400 horsepower, up from the 360 that the 4.2 would have had. And oh my God, this feels like another very special TVR engine. I love it, but I have to say it makes, the way they design the engines make no sense, because this feels like another, just like another race engine. So the 6 was definitely, it's almost like a motorbike engine, fab unit, but you have to rev it, you have to keep it in check, it's angry. I thought the 8 would feel much more civilized, much more torquey. Not really. I mean, it's tractable, but it doesn't feel torquey low down in the same way that the Rover V8 did. So they had two engines that essentially did the same thing, but just in very, very different ways, and commercially it didn't really make sense either. Now, the interior as well, it's absolutely bonkers. So many flowing lines, sort of changing curves, all leather of course. And it's interesting to note that TVR interiors and this one also, they're so nice, they're so different because they had to be cheaper. What do I mean by that? Well, it was too expensive to engineer a mass-produced dash for each of their cars because they were built in such low numbers. So instead, they basically were able to build these bespoke interiors. This one, unlike other TVRs I've been in, this car has, I think, just over 40,000 miles, but it looks and feels pretty good. It has some mental features, like if you want to raise the window up and down, where are the buttons? Not at all signposted, nothing. This, to the left of the stereo, left and right of the stereo. They just look like sort of finishing bungs or something, but once you know where they are, they work really well. The ventilation is mental. You don't have a separate hot and cold. You've got a hot fan and a cold fan, and you just have to sort of toggle between the two. To open the boot, it's the little Cerbera badge that you use. The doors you open from underneath. The mirrors, all this kind of bonkers TVR stuff I just love. And actually, when you get used to it, it works really, really well. The thing is though, how does it drive? The steering is uber quick, 2 turns lock to lock. It is assisted though, which I think helps. That engine is manic. It's just so sharp off the throttle. Now the throttle is quite long, I think, to give you a little bit of help, but it is rabid. And today there is just absolutely no grip, so it's difficult. I'm not quite going to be able to get the best of it, but it is at least drying out a little bit, so I can get a feel for it. We're just going to turn around now, and I'll try and rev it up to, I think it's 7.2 or 7.4 they go to. I'll go up to 7 to be safe. I'm not sure if it has a limiter, but it's just difficult. This has Yokohama, oh, a little bit of scraping on full lock on one side. I think Kai said that that's a chassis protector that just touches a little bit. All right. Just sounds like a chainsaw, that engine. I can't experience the full power of it today, but wow, it is a very, very special motor indeed. On these tight corners, it feels really, really good. This left-hander, notorious for the back end going out, just had a little waggle there and then I'd love to try this on a dry day, but already I am bonding a little bit with this Trevor. The gear change is quite heavy. It's very short. You've got the lovely milled aluminium gear stick as well. The brakes just feel perfect. Haven't been able to completely push them today for obvious reasons, but the pedal and the feel coming through, it's what all brakes should be like. After a while you get used to the hyperactive steering. The wheel just moves around a little bit, but you get good feel. There's great chassis control, but it's not too harsh feeling. This does have a sports exhaust, so it is louder. But the engine itself, it's rough, it's not smooth. Essentially, I think TVR managed to make a good car almost by mistake. If this was supposed to be a GT, well, it's a 2+2, it's got a bit more practicality than the normal TVRs. Well, yes, okay, it does. But the engine really isn't suited to a GT. It's far, far more sporting as a unit than that. The Cerbera production run was 1996 to 2007, which is almost identical to the 996. Not only was this less than half the price of the turbo and quicker, but it was also a third less than the standard 996 that only had 300 horsepower. So it was an absolute bargain. But there is a bit of a story to that drag race that happened in Clarkson's video, where this completely massacred all the competition. I think it would have been quicker in any case, because if you look at the sort of power to weight ratios, this has 290, the 911 Turbo has 260. It weighs a lot more, it's about 300 kilos more than one of these. And so it would have been quicker, but it was so much quicker in that race. And it appears, it came out years later, that that car and the car that was given to journalists wasn't using the normal production engine. It was using one of the race engines from the Tuscans. The steering wheel also has these very odd sort of protrusions just behind it on the rim, where you normally hold your hands. But that's actually really comfortable and works quite well. Steering wheel, as you can see, is a 2-spoke affair, and that is simply to make room so you could see the instruments that are below the wheel. And you have the typical sort of TVR central, well, typical, it's been in a couple of their cars, the vent, which is at the center below the wheel. Really bizarre. This is possibly the favorite that I've driven so far. What a car. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm going to link through to some of the videos that I've done previously on TVRs, so please do watch them if you're at all interested.